I feel like this dress could give Annabelle vibes. What do you think? Annabelle Creation is a movie about possession. In the peak of my loneliness, I started hearing weird creaking sounds coming from my wardrobe and weird tapping sounds coming from my window outside. And I remember being like, demon, can I have a hug? I've actually not heard any creaking coming from my wardrobe or any tapping since then. So the Conjuring multiverse is very vast. There's a lot of movies, there's a lot of storylines, and chronologically, the timeline does not match up with the movie release dates. So a movie can be released tomorrow and it's actually a prequel to a movie that's already been released. That's how I think the order goes from the timeline, not from movie release date. So first we have The Nun, then we have Annabelle Creation, then we have The Nun 2. See what I mean? The Nun 2 was released last month, but it's third in the timeline. That's how I think it is. There's debates. I'm going to be discussing Annabelle Creation. Why? Well, there's many reasons. It's my favorite Annabelle movie. It's also leaving Netflix today. Like, today's the last day to watch it. I kind of have to do this now because otherwise I won't have access to the movie. In terms of movie release dates, Annabelle Creation came after Annabelle. But in terms of the entire storyline, Annabelle Creation comes before Annabelle. Does that make sense? If I had to briefly explain what Annabelle Creation was about, I would say it's about a man and his wife letting a nun and a few orphan girls live in their house, and while they're living there, they get terrorized by a possessed doll. There are a lot of characters in this movie, so I will introduce them as they come up. With all that being said, let me now give you an unnecessarily thorough recap of Annabelle Creation. This is why I have to do this now. Last day, 30th of September. Annabelle Creation begins in a doll maker's workshop. We have dolls' heads hanging from the ceiling, dolls' arms and legs hanging from the ceiling. We have somebody polishing a doll eye. A sign is hanging up in the workshop. We see it says Mullins Toy Company, finest handcrafted dolls. And right next to that sign, we have Annabelle. The doll maker is called Mr. Mullins and he likes making dolls. Obviously, this is his latest creation. Does she look familiar? If she doesn't, she will. As Mr. Mullins is working, a note is slid under his workshop door. The note says, "Find me," indicating that somebody wants to play hide and seek with him. He decides to play along and enters this house right here. It's a very, very beautiful house. As he walks into the house, he finds another note. This time, the note says closer, indicating he is closer to the person he is trying to find. I just realized you can see all my makeup on my bed. Don't mind that. He walks into a lounge room. Well, I'm assuming it's a lounge room because there is a piano and there's couches and tables. He gets a pen from his pocket and he then writes on the note himself, and we see a curtain twitch. He puts the note down in a little bowl, walks away. A girl with pigtails emerges from the curtains. His daughter, the girl he is playing hide and seek with. His daughter reads the note. He has written "found you" on the note, then he grabs her and they laugh. And it's this really wholesome moment between a father and a daughter. I also think it's really nice that he stopped his work so he could play a game with his daughter. I just think that's so beautiful. Then a woman walks into the scene and she's like, "Samuel, B, stop." She then crouches down next to the little girl and says, "You don't want to get overheated." From this, we can gather that the little girl has a sickness or an illness and she's supposed to be resting so she doesn't, get a fever and die. Keep in mind, this specific part of the movie is set in 1943. The little kid says she's okay, and the mummy's like, "Are you sure?" And she's like, "Yeah, I am." So then she starts tickling her. Personally, I hate being tickled. You want to tickle me, I will bite you or I will scratch you because I can't stand that. So now it's bedtime and the mum is brushing her daughter's hair. It's a very heartwarming scene again. So obviously everything is about to go wrong because that's what always happens in horror movies. There's always a really nice, beautiful scene and then just B then asks her mom if she's allowed to listen to her record player for a little bit, and her mom allows it, and there's this really cheerful little tone. The next scene we experience is church bells ringing, and we see Samuel, his wife, and B coming out of the church, and B's like, "Can we play dollies when we get home?" And her mom says yes, as long as she helps with the washing up. This man named Vic or Victor comes up to them and he's like, "You got my dolls ready yet?" So I think this just really shows you how popular and successful Mr. Mullins' toy business really was, because like everyone wanted a doll. He then says that everyone in his store, that every day people are asking for dolls, for his specific dolls. So yeah, Mr. Mullins' business is very, very successful. Unfortunately, the trip back home is not seamless because the tire comes off this car and then the family is stranded. But luckily, a car is coming down the lane. This next part is very intense because as Samuel is like fiddling with the tires, a bolt comes flying off and lands in the road, and B is like, I'll get it. So she runs to get the bolt as the car is coming down, and pretend this is B, pretend this is the car, this is then what happens. So B gets hit and her doll's face is smashed on the ground. If you look here, this shot is very powerful because it insinuates that's what happened to B herself, but of course they're not gonna show that. Then we have a really intense title screen. It is 12 years later and the opening shot is on a cross with a little tiara crown on it. That was where B was hit by a car and killed. This van whooshes past it. It's here that we meet Janice and Linda. Linda tells Janice that she wishes they were going to a home instead of another orphanage, which tells us that the place they are going now is an orphanage, and also that Linda really just wants a home. The two girls make a pact with each other, which essentially states that if someone wants one of them, they need to want the other one, and they are not going to separate. Why does everything keep dropping when I'm talking about this movie? First my phone and now my earring. Does anyone else find that suspicious? Also, just for some additional information, both girls have dolls and the dolls kind of look like them. Anyways, then the nun who's driving with them is like, how much longer is it, father? And the father is all like, you're no worse than any of the girls, asking how long it's gonna take. Anyways, then we see the rest of the girls who are going to this orphanage. We are also then told that the place they're going to is the Mullins house. You know, the Mullins family from the start. So the Mullins family have agreed to bring in all these girls. 12 years later, after their daughter was killed from a car accident. The father then says that Mrs. Mullins has a condition and to not expect to see much of her. He says that she got the condition from an accident a few years ago. All the girls, they get out of the car, they're super excited because the house is really big and the house is really pretty. We then find out that Janice had polio and she needs a walking stick to help her walk. So all the girls get inside the house and they love it. There's a TV, it's really big. One girl even says that she's fine with never being adopted if this is the orphanage that they're gonna stay in. Famous last words. I'm sorry, I just have to. If things are too good to be true, that typically means that they are, from my personal experience. If you have an experience where like things were too good to be true and it ended up like working out for you, I'm really happy for you. But I don't know, for me, anytime something has seemed too good to be true, it has been. Even though the TV doesn't actually work, there's still a radio. Mr. and Mrs. Mullins' bedroom is on the ground floor. All the other bedrooms for the girls are upstairs. At first there is worry about how Janice is going to be able to get up the stairs because of her leg. However, the stairs has one of those moving chairs where you sit in and then it like takes you up the stairs. It has one of those things, so Janice can still be upstairs with the rest of all the girls. Because can we talk about how more places need to fix their accessibility? The chair works perfectly fine. It's very simple. You sit down, you need to put the seatbelt in so it can go up, and then you just flick the little lever the direction in which you want it to go to. Janice is up the stairs before anyone else, and there's this creepy little hallway, and there's a scary little girl standing in the doorway. I don't know, see, that's what it looks like, right? That's it. Do you see that thing there? That's the scary little girl. And she's just there. And so she like runs across, and then Janice hears some like rattling and some creaking, and she's like, but before we can get too scared, all the rest of the girls come flying up the stairs, and it's very bright, which shows you the power of the statement, there's safety in numbers. I always say this, a horror movie is always scary when one person is isolated. There are these really beautiful rooms. Two of the older girls take the beds on this side, and they also bags the bed on this side for the other girls. And then Janice is like, where will Linda and I sleep? And the girls are like, I don't know, in a different room. And from this entire interaction, we get that the older girls don't really like Janice and Linda. They like see them as these annoying little sisters. So Janice leaves and tries to find a different door. But as she goes to open it, Mr. Mullins comes up behind her and he's like, it's locked. And it stays that way too. She has found B's room. It's okay because Linda has found them a room In this room, there are a lot of dolls hanging from the ceiling. It's a little bit creepy, but what else can you really do about it? Sister Charlotte has her own room. She like hangs a little locket on the bed and unpacks her stuff. As she's holding this blanket thing, the food chute, I think that's a food chute, it like opens and then all her Bible pages start flapping. She goes over to it and like starts pulling the thing. It's very creepy. She slams it down and it just reopens again. See, those things scare me. I once saw a movie. What movie was it? I think it was Pet Sematary. And like the girl was in the chute and then she came crashing down and it was really scary. But of course, before we can get too scared or dwell on that, one of the girls comes into the room and demands Sister Charlotte's attention. Basically, she wants to know if they can go exploring. Right off the bat, there have been a few odd occurrences in this house. I think it's safe to say that it's haunted. All the girls leave to go exploring except for Janice because she's having trouble with her leg. Now, at first, Linda is like, I'll stay with you, Janice, but Janice is like, you promised you wouldn't treat me any differently. So then Linda leaves, and now Janice is alone. Bad things always happen in horror movies when the characters are alone. Janice gazes out of the window longingly at all the girls running by, and behind her, the door creaks shut, and we see that there's a little girl sitting behind it. Now, the little girl starts advancing towards Janice, but when Janice turns around, there's no one there. The door is just creaking. As she turns around to go back, she stumbles on her walking stick, which was leaning against the chair, meaning someone brought it over to her, namely that little girl. Then it's dinner time. Mr. Mullins says grace. They all sit around the table, but a bell is constantly ringing. Mr. Mullins excuses himself, and we then find out that the reason why the bell is ringing was because his wife was one calling it. And then this girl, Carol, she gets up to go and investigate because she's curious to see what Mrs. Mullins is about. So when Mr. Mullins opens the door and goes in, she like peers through and then like sees Mrs. Mullins like rise from the bed, and then she gets in trouble for spying and all the lights flicker. Back in their bedrooms, Linda and Janice pray, and they pray for parents. This movie is so sad. Janice has a very restless sleep. She keeps tossing and turning, and then she hears footsteps and a note is slid under her door. When she picks up the note, what does the note say? It says, "Find me." So she leaves her room and goes and investigates. To be fair, if a note was shoved underneath my door with like "Find me," I would be curious as to who wanted me to find them. But at the same time, I think I'd just pretend to be asleep and just ignore it. A note slides out from underneath the door that Mr. Mullins told her was locked and was always locked. And it says in here on the note, "This is your formal warning to increase your volume immediately." I go from talking like this to lowering my voice so it's so quiet, and I'm really sorry, but just this is your warning. I would highly recommend that you increase your volume. My phone died. I took all the notes that I needed to take to speak about this video because it is currently 11 and I'm going to tell you about the rest of the story while I take off my makeup. So the door unlocks and Janice thinks that it's Nancy or Carol. She obviously doesn't think that it's a possessed little girl. Then she like opens the door and like goes inside because she's curious, I guess. It's a little girl's room with doll trinkets and stuffed animals and tea sets. A sheet is covering an object in the middle of the room, and on closer inspection, Janice finds out that it's a little mini dollhouse. And at the start, remember this poster? It says dollhouse is coming soon, so that's the dollhouse. It's really beautiful. There's even like a mini Annabelle. Also, the daughter's name is B, but B is a nickname for Annabelle. Janice is looking through the house and she opens the mini closet cupboard door and she discovers a key. She hears a creak to the side, so she looks and she notices the life-size version of the closet wardrobe thing. She goes over to it and tries the key in the lock. It works. She opens it to reveal a room filled with Bible pages taped all over the walls, and there is this doll sitting on a chair in the middle of it. She gets creeped out, so she slams it shut, then it opens on its own, so then she like locks it. The lock does nothing and it opens again anyway. Remember how the dollhouse was covered with a sheet? Well, then Janice puts the sheet over the doll. Janice is oblivious. The covered doll, like, it stands up, but she's not paying attention to that. She's instead looking out of the window when she notices Mr. Mullins in like the yard and he's holding this like lamp thing. He kind of looks in Janice's general direction and freezes, like he can see her in his daughter's room. He quickly rushes upstairs. Janice herself panics and she quickly turns away. As she backs away, she notices the sheet thing. It like backs her into the corner. So the sheet keeps on advancing towards her until then it just like drops down and then it reveals nothing and it just like lands on the floor like nothing was there. Janice hobbles out of the room, and as she goes to shut Annabelle's door, it's like already shut and relocked, like she was never in there. She runs back into her room and Mr. Mullins comes up the stairs to investigate, and he's like sort of standing in the doorway for a little bit. Then we see the closet cupboard thing again, and the camera like swirls and there's a cross on the wall, and as it swirls the cross goes upside down. Now an upside down cross basically can mean like Satan, the Antichrist, any demonic forces, evil forces, basically just like the opposite of God. So now it's the next day and a few of the girls are standing around the well and they're basically just making fun of Mr. Mullins and Mrs. Mullins, well, all of them except for Linda. One girl says Mr. Mullins keeps his wife down in the well. Another one is like, wait, does she like wear a mask on her face? And the other's like, yeah, she does. She looks like a doll. Linda then tells them to stop, and she says that she thinks that Mr. Mullins is nice. Linda wants to play a game. They suggest hide and seek. They tell her to hide with the intent to never find her. I remember when I used to play hide and seek and like tips and stuff all the time when I was a kid at like school, and never in my life do I ever recall anyone wanting to be in. No one ever wanted to be the one finding people, and nobody ever wanted to be the one chasing people. Everyone just wanted to be the one getting chased or being hunted down. Sister Charlotte is fixing up one of the rooms because Mr. Mullins said that she could turn it into a classroom. So as she's in there, Janice comes in and confesses to going into the room that she wasn't supposed to go in. Charlotte is very disappointed because she says that they cannot disobey the Mullins at all, because if the Mullins don't let them live there, then they're all gonna have to be split up and separated. And she says that for her sins, Janice must do one Hail Mary and like help unpack like 3 boxes. So I looked up what a Hail Mary is because I didn't know. According to the dictionary, it is a prayer to the Virgin Mary used chiefly by Roman Catholics, beginning with part of Luke 1:28. Linda rushes around the house looking for a hiding place, and she finds a place underneath the stairs. It's like really creepy under there. Meanwhile, the older girls go investigating in a shed, and they find a scarecrow, and one of the girls, I think it's Carol or Nancy, it's one of them, they like taunt the scarecrow. That is what the scarecrow looks like he's got a face and everything. So back to Linda underneath the stairs. As she turns around, she notices Annabelle is sitting on a chair, and if you look closely behind her, you can see a demon. Like, that is what is behind Annabelle. Then Annabelle is like wrenched backwards, and Linda panics, screams, and like rushes out of there. And obviously the girls see her just laying on the ground, and they're like, you're a terrible hider. Remember like the food shoot thing? I think it's a food shoot because it's what people put the food on, and like they pull it up and then the food gets delivered. Well, Mr. Mullins like tends to it or whatever, and he basically blames the really rapid like opening and closing that Sister Charlotte experienced on the draft. Sure, the draft. Like, sir, me and you both know that is a lie. Anyway, then he picks up this picture here. Sister Charlotte and her nun friends. Who is that? It's Vlak, the evil demon. The nun evil demon. Also, the nun takes place 3 years before everything that's happening right now. Mr. Mullins is like, who is that? And Charlotte is like, I don't know, actually I don't think I've ever met her. Imagine taking a picture and then in the background there is just some like weird demon looming behind you. That's terrifying. That night, Carol and Nancy are underneath this blanket and they're telling scary stories about Mrs. Mullins. They say she gets powers at nighttime and that's why she's asleep all day. It's so then at night she can go out and feed. They say that if you look at her, you die immediately. They say that she'll say your name over and over again. They're basically just not being very nice about this woman. As they sit, they hear the bell that she rings, and so they're like laughing and they're like, ooh, she needs feed, but they're not laughing for long because they're like, hang on a second, why is the bell, why does it keep ringing? Why is Mr. Mullins not like helping her? Then there's like a creaking in their room and their torchlight fails. I can't think of anything more scarier in that situation. Your one light source just turning off. Then outside of the blanket, they can see a silhouette of someone and they're like, just don't look at her. The bell rattles again and then they think that she's gone, except then a hand like reaches out and like grabs one of their faces and they scream so loudly. Kate turns on the light and then Charlotte appears and is like, girls, like what's going on? And the girls are like, she's in here. And then Mr. Mullins appears and he's like, who's in there? And Charlotte's like, your wife apparently. And he says it's impossible for her to have been in the room and then he just like leaves. The next day, it's very bright, they're outside doing schoolwork. Nancy is really freaked out about the entire shenanigans of the night, but Carol on the other hand is like, we just scared ourselves, it was nothing, there was no ghost, it was not Mrs. Mullins, we just were paranoid. That's understandable. Sometimes when you are talking about scary things or you're watching something scary, then everything around you seems scarier than it really is. Moving forward, Charlotte hears like the little bell from Mrs. Mullins, so she goes in and gives Mrs. Mullins a water. Now here is where we get to know a little bit more about Mrs. Mullins. Her real name is Esther. We get to know a little bit more about her. She wears, that's like half of a doll face mask. She wears it on her face because Janice is inside. She like sort of peers in, and as she's leaving, she notices a picture frame on the wall. The Annabelle human and then the Annabelle doll, and they're sitting next to each other. And she puts the pieces together and is like, hang on a second, that was the doll I saw the other night. So like any rational person, she takes the picture, she's like studying it, and then she's like goes to put it underneath her covers, but as she does, she notices that the little girl's eyes go bright white. Very, very creepy. The You Are My Sunshine song starts playing in Annabelle's room on the record, and of course Janice goes and investigates. This girl is fearless. She is just not scared. She goes in there and she turns off the record and Linda follows after her. Linda has this like ball gun thing where when you shoot it, like a ball attached to a string comes out of it. So she shoots it and it hits Annabelle, the doll's face. Linda gets really freaked out and she's like, no, Janice, like we shouldn't be in here, like we need to leave. I'm leaving. And Janice is like, I'm not leaving. What? The doll is literally looking at them, but Janice is like, no, it's fine, like I want to stay in here. Go, get out. Linda leaves and then Janice finds this little book. It's filled with a lot of drawings, but there is also a diary entry. I'm going to read it out. It says, we had so much for the night, Mommy didn't help her make cornbread. Also, no, Mommy helped me with my dress. I insisted her. I could read it before, but it's very blurry on here. It's like empty for a few more pages before there's another little message, and the message just says, dear diary, today I came home, and then the bedroom door slams shut. There are these like creepy puppets and they start moving and dancing on their own. So Janice goes over there to investigate and she like grabs one and then looks behind her and there's no one there. The dollhouse lights up, so Janice again goes over to investigate and she picks up the little girl, and as she picks up the little girl doll, she notices the actual little girl standing at the window and she's like just tapping the window. And the little girl's like, help me. And then Janice is like, what can I help you with? And then all of a sudden the girl morphs into this demon thing. Now, not gonna lie, like this scene, the first time I saw this scene, like I jumped so much because the little girl, she then morphs into this like demon creature and it's like, I want your soul. It then drags Janice across the ground and like her nails dig on the ground and like draw back scratch marks on the floors. Somehow Janice manages to escape and she's like dragging herself to the door, and then there's like this creepy hand. It's like dangling down. It's got like blood red nails. It's like very creepy. Like all I can really describe is that it's creepy and it's scary and it's a little bit frightening. I don't like things with hands. She manages to escape and she is yelling out, but no one is there. All of the lights in the house, they all turn off, and all of the bedroom doors are shutting. And then she goes to the hallway, and the hallway like elongates. I heard a noise. She decides to go on the, you know, the stair thing that she was sitting on at the start? Wiggle the little button and it like takes you up the stairs. She goes on that, but it's like not working obviously because she doesn't put the seatbelt on. As she's sitting in this chair, Annabelle's room opens and the dark, foggy presence thing leaks out. Janice finally puts on the seatbelt. The chair goes downstairs. Then it just stops and then it starts going up this way. Naturally, Janice is freaking out because not only is the chair now going back upwards, well, Annabelle is standing at the top of the stairs. However, when she finally gets to the top, Annabelle is no longer there, and then like the whole entire house is silent. Janice is then plucked up into the air. Up into the air. Everyone else in the house is sleeping peacefully. On the bottom floor, we see a boot fly down from the top floor, and then all of a sudden, then Janice's body comes falling down with a loud thump. We can presume that Mr. Mullins took her to the doctor. Janice is now in a wheelchair, and they don't know if she'll ever be able to walk again. She's done. She wants to leave. She's like to Sister Charlotte, I want to leave. We all need to leave. Like, we need to go immediately. And Charlotte is like, we can't go anywhere else. We have nowhere to go. And this is the problem. They're trapped there because they don't have anywhere else to go. Other people are experiencing little things, but not to the extent of Janice. Let's be real here. None of the other ones were thrown from the top floor down to the bottom floor. As she's talking to Sister Charlotte, she's like, I didn't fall downstairs. Something threw me down, and she says that the evil presence is after her. Later that night, Mr. Mullins is wood carving in him and his wife's room, and he's like to Mrs. Mullins, I think it was a mistake bringing the girls here. He's like, what happens if the girls' fall wasn't actually a fall? Esther, Mrs. Mullins, is like, no, it was an accident. It was just an accident. Leave it alone. I like the girls hearing them around the house. Janice is now needing to live on the couch downstairs because she's in a wheelchair and she can't get up the stairs anymore. She also is then talking with Linda. Remember at the start they made a pact, if one family wants us, they're gonna get both of us. She wants to take that back because she claims that she's a burden and no one's gonna want her. Linda's very upset about this. They exchange their dolls, so they give each other's dolls. They reminisce a little bit about their old days at the orphanage. They used to sneak around at night and they would eat all the chocolate, and then the father used to think that they had mice, but it was really just them eating it. Linda goes to bed. As she is going to her bedroom, Annabelle's door unlocks, so she goes over and she peers through the keyhole, and as she looks through, she sees Annabelle sitting on a rocking chair, rocking back and forth. And then when she opens the door to look, Annabelle is gone, but the chair's still rocking. So making sure nothing is behind me. If you see something come out of that door, you let me know, okay? Sitting in her bedroom, and she's got that ball gun again, shooting it out into the hallway. The second time she shoots the ball out into the hallway, something grabs it. It's something big because it lifts the ball up and then yanks the ball gun away from her hands. She hears running. She screams and hides under her covers on the top bunk. All the lights turn off. Her bed shakes. Linda then looks down and she sees footsteps on the ground leading to the bottom bunk underneath her. She peers down the side of the bed and she makes eye contact with Annabelle and then sees a claw-like hand grab Annabelle's face and yank her away. Again, before we can get too scared, it immediately becomes morning and everything seems to be fine. And in the cold light of day, nothing seems scary. Sister Charlotte then drags Janice outside because she says that Janice needs some sunshine. Mrs. Mullins rings her bell, so Charlotte leaves her alone and goes back inside. All the other girls are far away and they are hanging up, washing on the line. So Janice is by herself, and this is not very good, especially when there is a dark, evil presence after her. Something shoves her wheelchair, and then the shed door opens, and then someone is like sprinting behind her, pushing her wheelchair into this shed thing. By the way, we don't know who this figure is. When Janice turns around to look at it, it's just like a hood. We can't see who it is. She is shoved in the shed, propelled off of her wheelchair, and she tries to hide, so much banging, someone walking above her head, and then all of a sudden the little girl, Annabelle, the real one, starts crawling towards her. All these people crawl and it's very unsettling. Can you imagine if something was to just crawl at us? The little girl crawls at Janice, gets on top of her, and then spews this black tar-like substance into her mouth, meaning that now Janice is possessed. Janice screams. Charlotte and Linda go and investigate. Janice is just sitting in there like, I'm fine. And something is not right. Linda tells the other girls that she is scared for Janice, and Carol, the voice of reason, is like, there is nothing wrong. Janice just probably wants attention. The next morning, Linda is sitting on the front porch when Mr. Mullins sits down next to her and asks if she's okay. Linda basically rats Janice out. She tells him that Janice has seen his daughter, and he's like, that's impossible, my daughter died. Linda is like, yeah, but like, she went into your daughter's room and she saw the doll with the white dress, and Mr. Mullins is furious about this. He's very upset about the doll part. I wonder why that is. He immediately goes inside and he sees the dining table, and Annabelle, the doll, is sitting at the end of it. There is a note next to her, and the note says, found you. You know, at the start, there was a game, the hide and seek game. And Janice then comes in and starts singing that Sunshine song, and Mr. Mullins is like, Janice, I told you not to go in that room. And then she starts cracking and getting bigger, and her eyes are like glowing. He's holding a cross, but something wrenches his fingers back. I have a picture. His fingers are being wrenched off that cross. His bones all snap, and then he screams, and then Sister Charlotte comes in to investigate, and he is dead on the ground. Mr. Mullins is gone, which is problematic because he's the one who has dealt with this evil presence before. That night, a hearse drives away, so I'm assuming that his body was in the back of it. Sister Charlotte is like, I need to talk to Mrs. Mullins. As everyone goes inside, Linda then notices that at the end of the porch, out the front, Janice is sitting there with the Annabelle doll sitting in her lap. This is when Janice and them are sitting on the porch. Then at night, the doll is just sitting on the couch and Janice is laying down asleep. Linda is a very good friend. She grabs the doll. She picks up a lamp, probably the same lamp that Mr. Mullins was using before. She picks up the lamp, has the doll in her hands, and she runs across the field. She's holding the doll and holding a lamp, and she's walking across the field to get to the well. Every time she walks, someone is like racing behind her. So she looks around, no one's there. Walks again, hears footsteps, looks around, no one's there. So she starts running. Sister Charlotte like looks out the window and sees Linda doing this. Linda eventually gets to the well and she takes off the well's lid. Pretend this is the doll's head. She's holding the doll's head over the well when Sister Charlotte comes and she's like, what are you doing? And Linda is like, this doll is evil. Drops it down. The doll does not like that. Sister Charlotte is like, come on, let's go back inside. Before Linda can go, she starts hearing whispering coming from the well, so she goes, investigates. She looks down. Someone grabs her down into the well, and if it wasn't for Sister Charlotte like grabbing her back, she would have fallen down the well. Sister Charlotte puts the well covering back over the well, and it's like really loud thumping. Then they both book it back inside the house. Back inside the house, Linda tells Janice that they finally got rid of the doll, but as she rips down Janice's sheet, Janice is not actually in her bed. Instead, what's in the bed? Annabelle, the doll. The doll they just threw down the well, it's now back in the bed. By now, all the girls are awake and Charlotte is like, where's Janice? And other girls are like, we don't know. So she's like, everyone go find Janice. She grabs the doll and takes it into Mrs. Mullins' room and she puts it down and she's like, what's going on? Mrs. Mullins panics when she sees the doll. She sees the doll and she's like, get that thing out of here. Get that thing away from me. Charlotte is like, what is going on? And then Mrs. Mullins is like, it's back. I knew it was back. Evil itself is back. Charlotte is demanding answers, and Esther Mullins, Mrs. Mullins, she gives them. After she and her husband lost their daughter, they prayed and they promised devotion to whatever power would let them speak to their daughter again. Everything started really small. That Sunshine song would play on the record player. little notes would be left everywhere. But then she wanted permission to live in the doll so she'd be able to be with her parents forever, and they said yes. They saw their daughter standing at the window, smiling at them, running through the house, but they soon realized that it actually wasn't their daughter. Mrs. Mullins was looking in the mirror, little Annabelle was behind her, but in the mirror it showed a demon. Esther held up a cross to her daughter, and that is when she grew and cracked, and it was clear that it in fact was not their daughter, it was a demon. So then this demon lunged at Mrs. Mullins. It scratched her face really badly. A demonic presence used Annabelle to manipulate grieving parents into giving it a soul that it could inhabit. It really tried to take Esther, but the church got involved and Esther's soul was saved. The evil was still attached to the doll, so they locked it in that little cupboard room after pasting Bible verses all over the walls, putting a cross on the wall, getting the priest to bless it. They thought that the evil was contained. As penance, they decided to let the girls live in their home. Unfortunately, that backfired. The older girls are still looking for Janice. They find her in Annabelle's old room. She's having a tea party with the doll. When they call Janice's name, Janice stands up and it's like, wow, Janice can walk, and she's holding a knife. Then it flashes to downstairs where Sister Charlotte is, and we can hear a scream from upstairs. We can put the pieces together that Janice slashed this girl's arm. Charlotte tells them to call for help, but to all stay together. The girls call the police and the police are on their way. Now they just have to wait it out. Mrs. Mullins then rings her bell, but she's not in her bed. She's hanging up on the wall, dead, and half of her body is missing. Her lower half of her body, it has been ripped off of her. Charlotte then finds Kate and Linda in one of the rooms and is like, come on girls, but Janice is in the doorway. Sister Charlotte's praying and holding up her cross. Janice just levitates her and then smashes her into a mirror. Linda and Kate then run. Linda then is like randomly dropped to the ground and is dragged backwards. Janice tells Kate to run away, then Linda is able to escape and she locks herself in a room. The other girls, they try to start Mr. Mullins' truck, but it's not working. The headlights are flickering on and off, and as they flicker on and off, one of the girls is aware of a scarecrow. The scarecrow. You know the scarecrow that they were making fun of before? Yeah, that scarecrow. Its head moves, something bashes against the car, all the girls panic and they run out. Do you remember the metal food chute thing? Linda puts herself into it, pulls herself down to try to escape from Janice. Then somehow Carol from outside, she ends up in the barn and the scarecrow is now in the barn. The door then shuts and slams and locks and she's just like stuck in the barn with the scarecrow thing. So the scarecrow is on the wall and Carol inches forward and there is a block of wood with an axe in it and she tries to rip it out, but she fails and instead just rips the handle off and then the axe head is still stuck in the wood. A bell drops out of the scarecrow's pocket, so we can assume that he was the one who was ringing the bell in Mrs. Mullins' room. The lights in the barn start to flicker. Scarecrow pulls itself away to reveal this demonic looking thing, and what's happening with the light bulbs is that they are getting unscrewed and then they're shattering on the ground, and Carol is panicked because she doesn't want to be in pitch black darkness. So there is a ladder placed conveniently under one of the light bulbs. She climbs up of it and like screws it so it can't unscrew. As she's like looking around to see where the scarecrow went, a demonic hand reaches out and like squishes the light bulb. Then she finds herself in the room from the very start that Mr. Mullins was decorating his dolls in, and the demon is trying to get in and she's very scared, but then Nancy comes from the back in this little room and he's like, come on, let's go. Linda finally pulls herself down the chute and she ends up in this really creepy room. She finds a torch, she shines the torch everywhere. There's blood on the wall, blood on the floor. There is this demonic looking woman and it starts crawling towards her. She's very scared. She quickly gets back in the chute and tries to pull herself up. Janice now has joined the party and Janice is trying to rip it down and she puts her little hands out, but then the hands like demon hands and they're trying to like push the chute down, but Linda has a torch and like bashes right between, so then the hands go away. It's a whole big thing. It's a very intense scene, but somehow eventually Linda manages to make it out alive. She finally gets out of the chute. The entire house is silent. Then she finally hears a noise. It's a very odd noise. It's like she sees Janice. Janice is holding a knife and is stabbing Linda's doll's face. So remember when they did the doll swap? She is stabbing the doll that Linda gave Janice. This scene parallels with the van scene from the start, as Janice said that she loved Sweet Sue's face because it looked like Linda's. Now she says the exact same thing as she stabs the face of Sweet Sue, the one that looks like Linda's. Janice starts walking up the stairs. Linda goes into Annabelle's room, into the room where all the Bible verses are pasted. Sitting on a chair behind her is Annabelle, and as she's looking at her, Janice then opens the door and grabs Linda out. Sister Charlotte comes to the door. She's somehow holding Annabelle. Annabelle is just, she's everywhere. She's everywhere at once. She's holding Annabelle, she's holding a rosary. Janice tries to stab Sister Charlotte, but she instead stabs the doll. So Charlotte grabs Janice and shoves her into the little Bible room, shuts the door, puts a closet down in front of it. Janice is like screaming and like trying to get out. All the lights are flickering, things are smashing. That stupid song keeps being played. The dollhouse is just slammed against a wall. The entire house is shaking, but eventually Sister Charlotte and Linda make it outside and they meet the other girls and they all meet together and they all look at the house and all the lights inside the house burst, and then the shed light also bursts, and they're just like all standing together like in shock. Eventually they hear a siren blaring and just everyone breathes a sigh of relief. The police investigate the house. They immediately go to Annabelle's room and they open the closet. The doll is sitting on the chair, but Janice is missing. There's like a massive gaping hole at the back of it, so that's obviously how Janice escaped. The next morning they still can't find her. The priest blesses the house and he comes out holding Annabelle and he's like, basically this doll was just a vessel for evil spirits, but it's gone now and now it's back to being a doll, so who wants it? Who wants this doll? And all of them just look at him and are like, then the doll is then shoved in the back of a police car. Remember at the start when they drove past the cross and the crown? Well, now they are driving to get away from the house. Sister Charlotte sits down with Linda and gives her a little debrief about the situation and says, that girl in there, that was not Janice. And she's just like holding the doll that Janice gave her, the real Janice, not the evil Janice. The end shows a couple walking into an orphanage. Who is their new daughter? Janice. Somehow Janice managed to find her way into a orphanage, and the couple that wants her is Mr. and Mrs. Higgins. Mr. and Mrs. Higgins. And get this, when they ask Janice what her name is, what does she say? She says her name is Annabelle. So yeah, Janice is long gone. Janice died in that shed on the floor when that little girl spewed that black tar into her mouth. You know what's really interesting? So this couple, they then give Janice / Annabelle a doll. This doll right here. Now, Annabelle is based off a true story. There was a Raggedy Ann doll, this doll to be exact, and I need to feed my cat. Real Annabelle doll was this. Then there is a 12 years later scene. Mr. and Mrs. Higgins are woken up in the middle of the night to a weird noise. It is Annabelle, who is evil Janice, the spirit in Janice's body all grown up, and she kills the dad, and then some random guy then kills the mom. Then the neighbors, so the blonde lady gets her husband to investigate. Now this is very, very important. Why is it important? Because this couple, the couple that goes and investigates, they are the focus couple in Annabelle, that movie. So then it's like a link. Then we get another ending scene. Now this ending scene is just Annabelle, she's sitting down, it like slowly pans in on her face, and then at the end she's like, but that is not the end. No, it is not. There is still one last final ending thing in this place. That's the nun. That is the end. So would I recommend this movie? 100% yes. I don't know where you can watch it, but yes, I would recommend that you watch this movie, especially during this Halloween season. Sunday, the 1st of October, meaning that my 31 days of Halloween officially starts today. Sorry for talking quietly.